Great team brands tell their stories. The best team brands communicate their stories to create an emotional connection with stakeholders while simultaneously building the brand. Stories are one of the oldest forms of communication, and although some of the platforms we use to tell the stories have changed dramatically, the fact that people love stories definitely hasn't. This is but one insight from the book Branding and Marketing You Through Teams. I have with me in studio the author of the book, Donna Rachelson. It's so great to see you again, Donna, and congratulations on producing yet another effective book on branding.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. In a nutshell, tell us about the focus of this book.
Well, my first book was Branding and Marketing You, that was very much focused on personal branding. And what I realized through the process is that teams, as well as people, have a brand. So what we tend to do is we focus on personal branding, we focus on company branding, but nobody had really explored this concept of teams having a brand.
It was the first time that I actually came across this concept myself. How complex was it to get the research together?
Okay, so because it was a new area, I didn't have much theory to fall back on. In fact, nobody had written a book on team branding. So the way that I like to do books is through research. So what I identified were some fantastic teams that I had come across during my career, but also ones that intrigued me. So for example, Gift of the Givers is an unbelievable team that has achieved an incredible brand in the market. So I approached those companies and asked if I could find out what their story was and see what was the theory that I could extrapolate that would support what they were doing to brand themselves.
Look, I read this book and I was truly inspired by your work. And when I came across the Gift of the Giver story as well, it really stood out for me, and I was going to ask you about that. Why did you choose the Gift of the Givers? That's because of the unique humanitarian approach, the service they offer. But what is it as a team that really stands out for you from the research you compiled?
So what I discovered about this team is they have an overriding credo that governs everything that they do. And it is driven at a leadership position right through the organization.
Are they a profit-making organization?
No, they're a non-profit,
okay.
But they get the most unbelievable funds channeled to them because they have a unitary and defining purpose that governs absolutely everything that they do.
And they've become a global leader in their field of expertise.
They have become an absolute global leader. In fact, when there are these huge crises, it is Gift of the Givers that is there first, that is highly operational, and they only do the best of the best. So some of their core values is they will never, for example, give second-hand goods or clothes or whatever to the people they serve. It's the dignity that is instrumental to everything. And I mean, it's those kind of core values that you will find that govern a great company brand, but what I found is instrumental to a team brand. But here's the interesting thing. You may have a team within an organization that, yes, they're organizational values that they're trying to drive from a branding perspective, but these teams actually have a different set of values that drive them as a team.
It's interesting what you said about their core value, because one cannot compromise on the core value.
Correct.
And should not compromise, because that will be the cornerstone of the success of the team brand.
100%. And I mean, you know, you introduced this session talking about story. Great team brands have a story. And every single person in that team understands what the story is. And based on the story, what is the value that they're ultimately going to deliver to their customer.
Sure.
And it's embedded in every single person.
That's fascinating. Also, what comes across in this book is what you speak about, the emotional connection, and that is the emotional connection that you're referring to. How difficult is it, though, for teams to get together to focus on that emotional connection?
So a key insight that came out of the book for me is that sometimes it's more how you do things as opposed to what you do. And great teams have experiences with their customers that get remembered and that get talked about and create emotional connections. So for example, one of the teams I interviewed was the Microsoft Strategy Services team. And the story that is told is that that team was called in for an emergency at a customer. They dealt with this crisis even though the product was not a Microsoft product.
I read about that, yeah.
You know, so those are the kinds of things that get spoken about. They get talked about. They become memorable experiences, and they create deeper emotional connection with
And the team players have to not come from an ego-centered approach when it comes to achieving goals. That's also important. We can't go into a team with our own agendas wanting to make an impression.
So here's the interesting paradox, is that great team brands are made up of fantastic personal brands, but they will never promote their own personal brand at the expense of the team. So there's not really room for ego.
Is that challenging, though, when you have to get people to invite people to come onto the team, to leave their individuality aside? How does that match encouraging new ideas?
So the team is challenged to go to new levels, and they are very driven individuals. So it's not to say that you're going to have sheep in your team who are, you know, just going to shake their heads, yes, yes, sir, no, sir. You have very ambitious, self-driven people, but it's always the overall purpose and ethos of the team.
It's about the service.
It's about the service.
So they have to buy into the service and want to serve.
Exactly. The higher level purpose as to why the team exists, as opposed to what am I going to be doing to look good.
Do you find that to be a common thread that came through in the research you compiled with all the different teams that you worked with?
I did. And what I found is that this concept of roles and responsibilities and strict hierarchy,
designations,
and who does what and designations, and that those are not tolerated in a great team brand, because it's about how does this team deliver on its purpose and how do we muscle together to give the best that we possibly can to our
And
customers.
that should also speak directly to personal branding. We need to let go of the titles to be able to serve. I mean, I was never a title person in my life. Even if I was hired into a senior position, it meant nothing to me at the end of the day, because you have a job that has to be done.
Exactly. And I mean, you know, often when I teach personal branding, what I say to people is actually your title means nothing. What also means nothing is the processes that you put in place to achieve what you need to. Nobody cares about your title. Nobody cares about your processes. The only thing that they care about is the key problems that you solve and the solutions you put in place. And that's where we need to focus.
How are you taking your findings forward to other companies so that they can also learn from your research?
Okay, so what I do is I do a lot of team interventions in companies. I do a lot with, for example, HR teams, IT teams, finance teams, teams that have a functional purpose in the business. And what I say to them is, are you going to be a dispensable function, or are you going to be an irreplaceable service? Because based on that, what is the team brand? And I mean, the principles are similar to building a personal brand. How is it that you want to be perceived by your key customers within the organization? Based on that, how are you currently perceived, and what is the gap? Based on that, how do we want to position you in your key customers' minds, and what is the messaging that we need to get across consistently about you, and what are the marketing strategies we're going to put in place to get you there?
That's really amazing, because what it does, as I see it, it opens up the space for you to reinvent yourself, to recreate your vision, to fit in with a broader vision, and that inspires you to want to do better in whatever it is you're doing and serving.
You are so correct. And, you know, often I find in corporate South Africa, we bandy terms around, you know, and, you know, often I work with an HR team. They've got to be the trusted strategic HR business partner. Now, what does that actually mean? You know, we have to add value. You know, what does that mean? And unless the team is aligned around what does it mean, what do we want to stand for, how do we want to be seen by our key customers, it's going to be very difficult to deliver on that promise.
Well, congratulations again on this great contribution that you've made in this book. And tell us about your new book that's coming out. What can we look forward to?
Look, it's on a slightly different tack, but it's a subject that I'm very passionate about, which is development of women, professional women in corporate South Africa as well as entrepreneurs. And I went on a fascinating journey which I explain in the book. And the book is titled What Women Can Learn from Men in Business.
That is fascinating. I can't wait to have a read. And I look
Wonderful.
forward to interviewing you on that book as well.
Great. Thank
All
you
the
so
best
much.
to you and take care.
Much appreciated.